Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark McLaughlin.
Morning. Thank you very much. Welcome to Ignite 2018. I'm Mark McLaughlin, CEO and Chairman at Palo Alto Networks. On behalf of everybody here at Palo Alto Networks, I'd like to welcome you to almost always sunny and hot Anaheim. I apologize about that. We'll go back to Vegas next year. I'll get it right. We really appreciate you taking the time with us over the next few days. We know that the most valuable asset you have is time, and we're really delighted that you're here with us today. You know, if we look around today, this is you. I hope you look all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. We have thousands of folks here today, the largest professional gathering of cybersecurity professionals in the world, and we're just delighted to have you here with us today. A little more specific on that, we have over 1,000 companies and organizations represented here with us from over 100 countries all around the world. We've got over 4,000 folks, and it's just great to have everybody here for the next couple days. And like I said, we'll do our very best to make the time very educational, hopefully useful as well. You know, when we started Ignite a while back, about 5 years ago, our goal was always that we would bring together the best and the brightest in security, that we talk about the hardest issues, that we collaborate together to figure out what's working, what's not working, how to make it better. And we always view our role in this as enabling. We're trying to bring people together, trying to get everybody to talk to each other, to figure out how do we actually make things better. You'll see that here at Ignite. It started yesterday, but through the next day and a half or so, you're going to see over 150 workshops. We have over 250 speakers. Don't worry, they're not all going to get up here in a row on the main stage. These different breakout sessions today, but mostly my point is we're trying to enable conversations on how we take the hardest problems and move the ball forward, because we know that together we're going to make a difference. We can get it done. And if you've been here before, you'll know a few things about how we think where we are today, right? We believe very much in that we are in the digital age, that everything that underlies our personal lives and our business lives is digital in nature. That's a realization that's very important. It's very important that drive productivity forward all the time and using these digital capabilities, and that the productivity that we all need to continue to power GDP growth and all the things we're going to need as a societies around the world, population growth and all the things we read about that are coming in the future, really hinge upon getting the digital age right. And we know that you can't have digital transformation if we don't have security transformation as well. You know, in our business lives, we talk about these words all the time, right? You probably hear this all the time back in your organizations. We certainly talk about it at Palo Alto Networks, which is the age of the digital transformation in business. And I think what that really means is, how do we harness the confluence of macro technology trends like cloud, you know, and SaaS and machine learning and analytics and behavior analytics and all these things that we're very excited about today, quantum computing. How do we harness all those things and bring them together to drive long-term, sustainable, competitive advantages in our business, which is so very important for all those businesses, right? But like I said, we don't think we get to have digital transformation if we don't have security transformation as well. And all I mean by that is the ability for us, for you, to also harness and use all these macro technology trends as well, so that we can disrupt how we've thought about things, how we've done things in the past, and can substantially move the ball forward so we can have better, predictive, consistent security outcomes at faster and faster speeds, because that's what we're dealing with on the outside in. And we also believe you don't get security transformation if we don't have trust, right? We can see this all around us today in businesses where trust bleeds out, right? And this is not even a security statement. It's just taking the responsibility that people have given us and making sure that we do the right thing the best way we can. Many of you in the room have given us the privilege to work with you. We take that responsibility very seriously, that you trust us to get it right. Your customers trust you to get it right. Some of that is security oriented, right? And getting it right from a security perspective, we think increasingly means keeping, maintaining, driving trust with our customers and using security transformation to get all the productivity of the digital transformation that we see all around us today. Now, another thing you would know if you've been here before is we're optimists. right? You can look around today and say, how can you be optimist? Doesn't feel like things are working. Security breaches are on the rise. Trust is eroding in different places at different times. We read about it all the time. But how can you be optimist about this? And the simple answer in that, I think, for all of us has to be, well, we have to be. The stakes are just too high not to be optimistic, right? I think we have to take this view, not out of naivete, but as a mindset and a constant reminder and a call to action that really failure is not an option in the digital age, right? Security failure, trust failure is really not an option in the digital age because the consequences of that would be so catastrophic in nature. So we have to be optimistic and move the ball forward and get some sense of like, what would it mean to actually get success here, right? So with many things in life, there can be positives and negatives, and some view of that from a cyber perspective is lots of productivity growth is very positive, but the same thing in the digital transformation that makes it so positive can undermine it as well, right? So how do we actually take something very positive and we contain it? How do we control it? How do we make the risk acceptable so that the success would be defined by taking those risks and making them acceptable business costs for us, subsumed from a business perspective for all of us as we move the ball forward, so that people don't talk about it personally, just assume that I'm going to get hacked, I'm going to lose my records, I'm going to lose my credit card information, my healthcare information, kind of a basic assumption that it's just going to happen to you. Right? So how do we take that, how do we take all the goodness and subsume that risk in our lives and our businesses so we can move the ball forward where people just aren't scared all the time or thinking about it all the time? And how would we know when we got there? Right? And the starting point in all that, we think, is to recognize what the nature of the problem is in the first place. And we think the nature of the problem is one of a math battle. And the reason for that is to start with a recognition that cost of compute power has been going down for a long time. It's probably going to keep going down for a long time, right? And when the cost of compute power goes down, from a security perspective, from a bad guy perspective, they get to harness that just as much as we do, probably more than we get to, right? So they get to launch more attacks, more sophisticated attacks, more aggressive attacks for less and less cost. The economic model is seriously out of balance. So we need to seek the same kind of leverage that the bad guys are getting as well. So if we start with the presumption that what we're fighting is a math battle, then we'd also recognize as well that we're fighting an increasingly automated adversary, right? As I said, they are going to be more sophisticated over time. They are more automated. They are more orchestrated. They are all those things, all those words we like to use about what has to happen in security to get better and better and faster, often in advance of how fast we can utilize those same capabilities. That's the equation that has to change. We really need to come together, and we really need to change that in a lot of ways. And we think about that from a mission perspective ever since we opened the doors at Palo Alto Networks about 12 years ago with this mission, which was to protect our way of life in the digital age. Now that sounds like a very ambitious statement. It is an ambitious statement. It's meant to be an ambitious statement, and the reason for that is it lets us do a lot of stuff, not just be a technology company, but more than that, in partnership with you and lots of other people around the world about how we can move the ball forward because the stakes are so very high. So everything we do is designed to move this mission statement forward, and we have the privilege of engaging with lots of people around the world, including most of the folks in this room as well, on how we get to move this mission forward, not just technology, but other things as well. And in doing that, we're always very focused on the concept of leverage. That goes back to the statement that we're fighting a math battle, right? If you're in a math battle, you're always going to be seeking leverage, right? So how do we get more bang for the buck from a people perspective, a time perspective, a money perspective, a training perspective, a societal perspective, that everything that we do and that you do, when we put a resource against this problem, how do we get increasing amounts of leverage out of it in order to get on the right side of this math equation? And when we're going about this as a company, we always start with this as a mission. And I wanted to talk with you about a few things, right, that may not be the most obvious things you think about when you think about Palo Alto Networks, because most of our time we get to spend with you is as a technology company, which we take great privilege in doing that. But there's more going on than that, where we're trying to bring resources to bear, along with you very often, on trying to move the ball forward and get leverage and move this mission forward as well. And some of those we've had the chance to engage with you. Others maybe perhaps we haven't. We'd love the chance to do that as well. So we look at this in four main areas right, which are up here in a policy perspective. How do we think about things culturally perspective? How do we think about things from a systemic perspective? And how do we think about things from a technology perspective? And in all of these four areas, trying to drive as much leverage as possible in the shortest amount of time as possible, but also taking a very long view, because we know that cyber is something that's with us absolutely for our lifetime and beyond. So we want to look at these kind of places here and see if we put some resources into this with you, ideally, how can we really move the ball forward on that? So I'll just touch on some of these very briefly, because again, these are probably things you're not associating with us or with others, but they're very interesting things that are happening. And the first is in the policy perspective, and I'll call this the political will perspective, right? Which is to recognize that cybersecurity is an existential threat to the digital age. Existential threat to the digital age, and act like it, right? How do we get the political will, the policy will, that we get a national or international organizing principle around this concept and stop incrementing? It's very important that we move the ball forward every day of the week, as we do, as you do, as practitioners around this. But we think we need an organizing principle that's much broader than that. Something very ambitious that we can fall behind with a big definition of success to say, while we move the ball forward, what are we actually trying to get done, right? And the principle we put here in the cyber moonshot, and using the moonshot example from the 1960s of a very ambitious statement at the time, we're going to put somebody on the moon and bring them back alive, and we're going to do it by the end of the decade, right? Things that people thought, no way, not going to happen. And if it can happen, it's not going to happen that fast, right? So the idea of the cyber moonshot here is to say, what if we said our mission as a society was we're going to make the internet safe in 10 years? Right? Ambitious, doable, I don't know. What does safe mean? We could argue about it. Get it done in 10 years? Maybe, maybe not, right? But the point is, can we get some organizing principles with something ambitious like this to say, this is how we define success, right? Because if we thought about it this way, we would think about things a lot differently, I think. In technology, we wouldn't think about incrementalist approach. Quantum computing, we definitely make sure we get that before the bad guys. Diplomacy, how do we use cyber as statecraft, as a stick and a carrot? What are we going to do actually in our education system to make systemic, long-term changes that actually matter? How about the supply chain? What are we going to do about that? Right? These are things that are actually very important. And if it was your job that you had to make the internet safe in 10 years, we probably would think about things differently. Now, I'll mention this one because I think you're going to hear a lot more about this one. I've had the privilege outside of Palo Alto Networks for the last decade to serve on the President's National Security Telecommunications Advisory Council as the vice chair, the chair, and right now I'm chairing the subcommittee on this topic, which was kicked off recently at the White House last week, actually, to say, that's the goal. How do we make the internet safe in 10 years? And to get the government to do what the government can do well in this public-private partnership, which is to stand up on the bully pulpit from a leadership perspective and say, that's where we're going. This is where we're going. On an international basis as well, because no one nation can make this true. Right, very potentially energizing, organizing national principle here, international in flavor and nature to make this thing work. And if this sounds interesting to you and you'd like to have something to do with it, we'd like to hear from you. We've had over 20 companies come in and testify so far. We've had over 50 experts come in and testify so far about what would this mean, how would we get there. And we'd love to hear from you about this as well. And I think you're going to hear about more of this just generally because the government's going to pick this up and run with this as something that's very important, existentially important in the digital age. The second area, and we do a lot more than that in policy, by the way, but that's the one I want to mention. The second area up here is really about culture, right? A culture of cooperation, a culture of optimism, a culture of transparency. Because without those, we're not really sure how you can move the ball forward as well. So how do we work together differently, disruptively? You heard hands-on disruption again and again here. How do we disrupt our way of thinking about how do we work together and get stuff done to move the ball forward? Because if we need leverage, we need to work together a lot more than we're working together today, right? That's how we're going to get leverage here. And one of the things I wanted to mention here of many, many things I could is the Cyber Threat Alliance, something we started about 5 years ago. And the Cyber Threat Alliance was based upon the principle that in the security industry, it's about the only industry in the world that actually doesn't share information with each other, right? The security industry, everybody likes to come to you and tell you how good my information and data is, and that's why you should buy my stuff, right? We think that our idea has been archaic for a long time. Has to change. that the security industry actually needs to learn to compete with each other, not on what we know, but what we do with what we know. And that indicators of compromise and threat intelligence, they should be commodities that are readily shared by all companies and then make their way into products, and that's how you differentiate yourself, is from a products perspective. Now, that sounds ambitious as well. The good news is it's real. So we started about 5 years ago. Today, the Cyber Threat Alliance consists of Palo Alto Networks, Cisco, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Symantec, McAfee, and lots of other leading companies. And the way that actually happens is just stood up servers, and we use machine language, and we share those indicators of compromise and threat intelligence every single day. And we level the playing field, and then we'll compete with each other on our technologies, products, and platforms. That's now a nonprofit organization. It's not captive to anybody in the security industry, and it's growing very quickly. And their ultimate goal in the Cyber Threat Alliance is to use that information to dissect adversary playbooks in a highly automated way as fast as possible, and to publish against them. Because if we could do that for 10, 50, 100, 500, 1,000 adversary playbooks very, very quickly, and we make the bad guys move, move, move. They can't use the same playbook again. That is disruptive and will change the economic model for them. They do not have infinite resources together. I wanted to mention this one because I have an ask on this one, which is the next security vendor that comes in to talk to you, ask them if they're part of the Cyber Threat Alliance. There is no good reason why they shouldn't be. And frankly, that's how we got all these other companies in as well, because people like you started to ask them to say, why aren't you doing that, right? It's amazing what a little peer pressure will do. So let's get everybody in the Cyber Threat Alliance. We're going to expand it beyond security companies as well to everybody who's got good threat intelligence, right? We think that's how we can get to a better place there. The next area I want to mention really is in the educational realm up here. And here, we need what I call fundamental, systemic, long-term leverage and change, right? What are we actually doing to teach cyber hygiene, the basics of cyber, cryptography, STEM education? What are we actually doing around that? We'd like to get help to put more and more resources into here, to get a 10-to-1 advantage for every dollar that goes in. You're going to hear about this a little later on from Mark Anderson on various things we're doing, including some of the cool stuff with the Girl Scouts and educational institutions. But this is an area where we need to bring a lot more underrepresented folks to the fight. There are a lot of people who want to come to this fight. Minorities, women, veterans, they want to come to the fight. They're ready and willing to do that. How do we systemically change the way things are today and get more leverage inside of this fundamental aspect of education? So stay tuned on this. Love to get more of your help on this as well. And the last area, of course, is on technology. This is one where you're going to know Palo Alto Networks the best. You hear from us the most often on this. And on the technical front, we've been trying to drive leverage through what I call revolutionary evolutions or evolutionary revolutions. It doesn't matter which way you say it up there. But what I mean by that is, how do we harness those macro technology trends to revolutionize things and move them as fast as we can forward, but also recognize that this is enterprise security. It's hard. It has to evolve over time. And we believe that over time, we've been able to do that with your help and other people's help to gain increasing leverage back into the math battle. And we think there's been about 3 major evolutions in the last 10 to 12 years. The first was in network security, where it's well proven today that you can take the tried and true principles of the kill chain and what has to happen in security, and you can turn them into SaaS and run them out of the cloud. And you can get simultaneous operations of software. So you get automatic orchestration and automation, ecosystem leverage from cloud. That's the first evolution. Still happening, right? Because this is evolutionary nature, but well proven. The second was saying, well, if you could do that, could you do that the same way? Could you get the exact same outcome from a security perspective, no matter where data is? Doesn't matter where data is in the network, or in an endpoint, or an IT device, or a cloud, or a third-party SaaS application. Can I get a consistent security outcome? And the answer to that is, yes, you can. Can we break down those silos of thinking to say, security on the network's one way, it's on the network, on the endpoint it's another way, and the cloud, boy, that's something entirely different. We better come up with something entirely different. Consistency will matter in getting the leverage that we need on this, and that is the second evolution underway right now. And the third one, which we're going to hear a lot about on this one, is the application framework. All right, so I'm not going to dive too much into this because Nir and Lee are going to get into a lot of this, and you're going to hear some great stuff from Lee, by the way. You definitely don't want to miss that after the break. But on the application framework, which we would call the third evolution. And the application framework is the drive on these evolutions to get to a security operating platform. These are software words, right? Security operating platform. And it is defined by bringing software to a software fight. Don't bring people to a software fight. Have people focus on what they're good at and bring software to fight software. So that's the first definition of what the application framework is about. The second is to get ecosystem leverage that's growing in faster and faster rates. You don't have to do anything other than look around this room to see that, of the ecosystem size and how fast it's growing, and the leverage we get by working together with automated operating platforms. The third is the exponential growth in data that comes out of that and the analytic capabilities that can be applied to that. It gets better and better and faster and better and faster and better all the time. Next is getting automation and orchestration out of that, because these things are software. Running these operations, like I said, simultaneously or very close to simultaneously, they go faster and faster, so we can automate workflows as much as possible and as fast as possible. And the last point around this, and very important, is to make a major dent in a very serious problem in security today. And that's, how do you operationalize all this innovation? Kind of interesting, I think, in the security industry. Any day of the week, there's 2,000 security companies. They're all calling you, all right? And there always are. Why? Because security moves very quickly. We need a lot of innovation in security. Arguably, I think we need more innovation in security than we have today. No one company can do it all. We definitely can't. That's why there's all these companies that keep coming up. And there's some of them are very interesting. Some of them are very important as for what the feature is or the function that they do. But the problem is that they all have to get data, right, in order to do their thing. And ideally, they also want to enforce answers. So they're all going to come to you and say, I've got this great idea. It's an algorithm. And if you like the idea, all you need to do is install my thing everywhere. On the endpoint, network, whatever. I need you to put a data sensor in and put it in an enforcement position, please, right? And that we've got to the point where we're crippled from an operational perspective of, doesn't matter how good the next thing is. How do I run it? How do I pick it? How do I maintain it? How do I pay for it? How do I train it? What do I do with it, right? It doesn't work with the next thing. So the operational breakdown of how do we consume innovation is very important. And we think the application framework goes a long way to fix this, because we've taken a view to say, wait a minute, step back. What if you had a whole lot of data sensors already deployed in all the right data locations, in all the right enforcement positions, and lots of data coming off of that? And what if you opened up the data lake to those innovators and said, your job is to focus on the application, focus on the software, focus on the innovation around that algorithm, write it as an application into the data lake, and you don't need to be in the business of installing another data sensor, and the customer doesn't need to be in the business of running another one either. Use the data that's already being collected, use the data lake that already has all the data, and focus on those applications, right? This, we think, is very important, because it should help innovation actually grow from here. I say this a lot. There's 2,000 security companies. Most people shake their head and say, yeah, I know, they're all calling me. How do I choose them? I think it should be 4,000, right? The issue is not that there's too many companies in security. We need more innovation. The issue is, how do you consume it, right? And if we had an application framework, we had an app store for a lot of things in security where you could consume it as SaaS. You turn it on, turn it off. Pay by the week, by the hour, by the month, right? All the things we think of in SaaS and security, and it worked. It'd be very important to move the ball forward and get leverage on this operational model. You're going to hear a lot of folks who've written applications into the application framework. This is very real. We're very excited about that. And we think that's going to move the ball forward substantially, right? So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for Lee. I started off by saying, here's our mission: protect our way of life in the digital age. More important than our mission, we think it's important, is your mission and your success. We're laser focused on that for those who've given us the opportunity to work with you. We appreciate the privilege to do that. This is what we're doing as a company. We want to drive these things forward. We want to engage with you as much as possible and make your mission very successful. We're deeply committed to that and aligned with you, which is why we're so excited to have all of you here at Ignite today. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the show. I hope you enjoy all the sessions. I hope you take the opportunity to network with some of the smartest people in the world who are sitting around with you. And I hope that at the end we'll get your input and feedback so we can make it better and better every single year for you. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you have a great show. Thank you.